The morning fog hung thick around Windsor Castle as Captain James Morrison adjusted his ceremonial sword and checked his watch. 23 years of faithful service to the crown had taught him to notice even the smallest details that seemed out of place. Today, something felt different in the air, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. Queen Elizabeth sat in her private study, her weathered hands trembling slightly as she held the small velvet box. Inside lay the Distinguished Service Medal, one of the highest honors she could bestow upon a civilian. The golden medal caught the early sunlight streaming through the tall windows, casting small rainbows across the mahogany desk where countless important decisions had been made over the decades. She had been thinking about this moment for weeks now. The medal was meant for someone special, someone who had shown extraordinary courage and dedication during a recent charity mission in war-torn regions of Africa. The recipient had risked everything to save dozens of children from a collapsing orphanage, working tirelessly for 3 days straight without rest or proper food. What made this decision particularly difficult was the identity of the person she wanted to honor. Dr. Michael Hartford had once been very close to the royal family, particularly to Camilla during her younger years. Their relationship had ended decades ago, long before Camilla married into the royal family, but the connection remained a sensitive topic within palace walls. Camilla, now the queen consort, had learned about the planned ceremony through whispered conversations among the household staff. She understood the queen's reasoning perfectly well. Michael deserved recognition for his humanitarian work, regardless of their shared past. However, she also understood how this might look to others, especially to those who still questioned her place within the royal family. The palace corridors buzzed with quiet speculation. Servants hurried about their daily duties, but their conversations carried undertones of curiosity and concern. Some wondered if this was appropriate, while others defended the queen's right to honor whoever she deemed worthy. The divide in opinion was becoming more apparent with each passing day. Captain Morrison had served under 3 different monarchs and witnessed countless ceremonies, scandals, and celebrations. He prided himself on maintaining absolute loyalty and discretion, but lately, he found himself questioning certain decisions being made at the highest levels. His fellow guards shared similar concerns, though none dared speak openly about their doubts. During the weekly briefing in the guards' quarters, tensions finally came to the surface. Sergeant William Thompson, a decorated veteran with 15 years of service, cleared his throat nervously before speaking. He expressed what many of them had been thinking but were afraid to voice. The timing of this particular honor seemed problematic, given the current political climate and ongoing public scrutiny of the royal family. The other guards listened intently as Thompson explained his concerns. He wasn't questioning the Queen's judgment or Dr. Hartford's worthiness, but rather the potential consequences of such a public gesture. The media had been particularly harsh lately, looking for any excuse to create controversy or cast doubt on royal decisions. Captain Morrison found himself in an impossible position. His duty was to protect the royal family from all threats, including those that might damage their reputation or standing with the public. Yet he also owed complete obedience to the Queen's wishes, regardless of his personal opinions about their wisdom. As the discussion continued, more guards began sharing their thoughts. Some argued that the Queen had earned the right to make such decisions without interference after decades of impeccable service. Others worried that this particular choice might provide ammunition for critics who already questioned the monarchy's relevance in modern times. The debate grew more intense as evening approached. These men and women had sworn oaths to protect the crown with their lives, but they had never faced a situation where they felt the crown might need protection from itself. The ethical dilemma weighed heavily on everyone present. Meanwhile, Camilla spent her afternoon in the garden, tending to the roses that had become her sanctuary during difficult times. She understood better than anyone how quickly public opinion could turn against a royal family member. Her own journey to acceptance had been long and sometimes painful, marked by constant scrutiny and judgment. She thought about Michael and their brief but meaningful relationship from so long ago. He had been kind, intelligent, and passionate about helping others even then. His recent heroic actions in Africa didn't surprise her at all. If anything, she was proud that someone she had once cared about had grown into such a remarkable person. The internal conflict wasn't about jealousy or lingering romantic feelings. Those emotions had faded long ago, replaced by mutual respect and genuine friendship. Her concern was purely practical. How would the public react? How would the media spin this story? Would it somehow reflect poorly on her husband Charles, or undermine the stability they had worked so hard to achieve? Dr. Hartford himself remained unaware of the growing controversy surrounding his upcoming honor. He was currently back in London, recovering from his latest humanitarian mission and preparing to return to his medical practice. His assistant had mentioned something about a possible royal ceremony, but he hadn't given it much thought. His focus remained on planning his next charitable expedition and treating his regular patients. The Queen's private secretary, Lady Margaret Ashworth, found herself caught between competing loyalties and responsibilities. She had served the royal family for over 30 years and understood the delicate balance required to maintain both dignity and public support. This situation presented unique challenges that required careful navigation. Lady Ashworth had already fielded several inquiries from journalists who somehow caught wind of the upcoming ceremony. Their questions were polite but pointed, clearly fishing for any hint of scandal or impropriety. She had managed to deflect most of their probing, but she knew it was only a matter of time before the story broke publicly. The palace staff noticed the increased tension among the guards and senior household members. Maids and footmen exchanged worried glances as they went about their duties, sensing that something significant was brewing beneath the surface. The usual cheerful atmosphere had been replaced by an undercurrent of anxiety and uncertainty. The ornate grandfather clock in Camilla's sitting room chimed 9 times as Captain Morrison entered, his polished boots silent on the Persian carpet. The Queen Consort sat beside the window, morning light illuminating her thoughtful expression as she gestured for him to take a seat. The formality of the moment felt heavy, yet there was an underlying warmth that made the conversation possible. Morrison had rehearsed this conversation countless times during the sleepless night, but now, facing the woman he had sworn to protect, the words seemed inadequate. He began carefully, explaining the concerns that had emerged among the Guard Corps about the upcoming medal ceremony. His voice remained steady and respectful, though the gravity of the situation was clear in every syllable. Camilla listened without interruption, her hands folded in her lap as she absorbed the implications of what the captain was telling her. She had suspected that the guards might have reservations, but hearing it confirmed brought a mixture of disappointment and understanding. These were good people, loyal servants who genuinely cared about the royal family's well-being. The captain explained how the guards viewed their role not just as physical protectors, but as guardians of the monarchy's reputation and stability. They had witnessed firsthand how quickly public sentiment could shift, how a single misstep could generate months of negative headlines and undermine years of careful relationship building with the British people. What surprised Camilla most was the depth of their analysis. The guards had clearly thought through the potential ramifications far more thoroughly than she had initially realized. They understood the political climate, the media landscape, and the delicate balance required to maintain public support for an institution that many viewed as outdated or irrelevant. Morrison stressed that their concerns were not about Dr. Hartford's worthiness or the Queen's right to bestow honors. Rather, they worried about timing, optics, and the potential for misunderstanding. The current political environment was particularly volatile, with Republican sentiment growing stronger and traditional institutions facing increased scrutiny. The conversation took an unexpected turn when Camilla asked the captain about his own opinion, separate from his duties as a guard. For a moment, the formal barriers dissolved, and two people who cared deeply about the monarchy's future spoke honestly about their fears and hopes. Morrison admitted that his personal feelings were complicated. He respected Dr. Hartford immensely and believed the man deserved recognition for his humanitarian work. However, he also feared that this particular honor, at this particular time, might provide ammunition for those seeking to damage the royal family's standing. Camilla shared her own internal struggle, explaining how she had wrestled with similar concerns but ultimately supported the Queen's decision. She spoke about the importance of not allowing past relationships to overshadow present merit, and how the monarchy's credibility depended on making decisions based on principle rather than political calculation. The discussion revealed the complexity of modern royal life, where every action was scrutinized, analyzed, and often misrepresented by various interest groups. Both the captain and the Queen consort understood that they were navigating uncharted territory, where traditional protocols seemed insufficient for contemporary challenges. As their conversation continued, other members of the Guard Corps grew increasingly anxious about their captain's unprecedented meeting. Sergeant Thompson paced the guards' quarters, wondering if Morrison was overstepping his bounds or taking necessary action to protect the institution they all served. The younger guards looked to their more experienced colleagues for guidance, but found only uncertainty and tension. Some began to question whether they should have remained silent, while others worried that speaking up might be seen as insubordination or disloyalty. Meanwhile, Queen Elizabeth continued her daily routine, unaware of the growing crisis surrounding her planned ceremony. She had spent the morning reviewing briefing papers and meeting with government officials, her mind focused on the numerous responsibilities that came with her position. The medal ceremony was just one of many items on her busy schedule. Dr. Hartford's assistant finally reached him with news about the royal honor, and his reaction was one of genuine surprise and humility. He had never sought recognition for his humanitarian work, viewing it simply as his duty as a physician and human being. The idea that the Queen herself wanted to honor him felt overwhelming and deeply meaningful. However, as news of the upcoming ceremony began to leak beyond palace walls, Hartford started receiving calls from journalists seeking comment. Their questions made him realize that his past relationship with Camilla was being viewed as somehow relevant to the honor, which troubled him greatly. He immediately called the palace, requesting a private conversation with someone who could help him understand the situation better. His concern was not for his own reputation, but for any potential embarrassment or difficulty his acceptance of the medal might cause for the royal family. Back at the palace, Lady Ashworth found herself managing an increasingly complex web of communications and concerns. The Queen's unwavering commitment to the ceremony, Camilla's supportive but worried stance, the guards' respectful but firm objections, and now Dr. Hartford's own questions about whether he should accept the honor. The afternoon brought an unexpected development when several members of Parliament privately expressed their own concerns about the ceremony's timing. They weren't questioning the Queen's prerogative, but they worried about potential political ramifications that could affect ongoing negotiations with Republican movements and constitutional reform discussions. Captain Morrison's meeting with Camilla had stretched longer than either had anticipated, and their conversation had evolved from a formal briefing to a genuine strategic discussion. They found themselves analyzing not just the immediate situation, but the broader challenges facing the monarchy in an era of rapid social and political change. Camilla made a decision that surprised even herself. She asked the captain to arrange a meeting with the senior guards who had expressed concerns, along with key palace staff and advisors. Rather than making this decision in isolation, she wanted to hear all perspectives and find a solution that honored everyone's legitimate concerns. The unprecedented gathering was scheduled for that evening in the Queen's private conference room. Word of the meeting spread quickly through the palace, generating both excitement and apprehension among staff members who had never seen such open dialogue about royal decisions. As evening approached, the participants prepared for a conversation that could reshape how royal decisions were made in the future. The traditional top-down approach was being challenged not by rebellion or disrespect, but by genuine concern for the institution's welfare and recognition that modern challenges required new approaches. Dr. Hartford made his own decision during the afternoon. He requested permission to visit the palace in person, wanting to discuss the situation face-to-face rather than through intermediaries. His integrity demanded that he understand fully what his acceptance of the medal might mean for everyone involved. The stage was set for an evening that would test the flexibility and wisdom of one of the world's oldest institutions. Traditional protocols were being stretched, but not broken, as people who cared deeply about the monarchy's future sought common ground in an increasingly complex situation. The palace corridors buzzed with nervous energy as sunset approached. Staff members who had served the royal family for decades had never witnessed such open debate about a royal decision. Some worried that this represented dangerous precedent, while others saw it as a necessary evolution of how the monarchy operated in the 21st century. The Queen's private conference room had never hosted such an unusual gathering. Ancient portraits of past monarchs looked down upon a scene that would have been unimaginable in previous centuries. Captain Morrison, Sergeant Thompson, and 3 other senior guards sat alongside Lady Ashworth, 2 private secretaries, and Camilla herself, all united by their shared concern for the monarchy's well-being. Dr. Hartford had arrived earlier that evening, his modest demeanor contrasting sharply with the grandeur of his surroundings. He had requested this meeting not to lobby for the honor, but to better understand the complexities his acceptance might create. His genuine humility impressed everyone present, reinforcing why the Queen had chosen to recognize his humanitarian work in the first place. Camilla opened the discussion by acknowledging the unprecedented nature of their gathering. She emphasized that they were not questioning the Queen's authority or wisdom, but rather seeking a path forward that honored her intentions while addressing legitimate concerns about timing and public perception. The room's atmosphere was tense but respectful, filled with people who genuinely cared about finding the right solution. Captain Morrison presented the guards' concerns with military precision, outlining specific scenarios where the medal ceremony might be misinterpreted or exploited by critics of the monarchy. He stressed that their objections were strategic rather than personal, based on careful analysis of current political and media landscapes. His presentation revealed the depth of thought that the security team had put into protecting the royal family's reputation. Sergeant Thompson added his perspective, drawing from his experience with public events and crowd control. He had witnessed firsthand how quickly positive royal events could turn negative when media coverage focused on controversial aspects rather than the intended message. His concerns were practical and grounded in real-world observations of how royal ceremonies were received and interpreted. Dr. Hartford listened carefully to all perspectives before speaking. When he finally addressed the group, his words carried the weight of genuine moral conviction. He explained that while he was deeply honored by the Queen's recognition, he would never want his acceptance of the medal to cause any difficulty for the institution that had served the British people so faithfully for centuries. The doctor's willingness to step aside for the greater good impressed everyone present, but it also highlighted the fundamental unfairness of the situation. Here was a man who had risked his life to save others, being asked to sacrifice recognition he had legitimately earned because of political considerations beyond his control. Lady Ashworth shared intelligence about media interest in the story, confirming that several journalists were already investigating the connection between Dr. Hartford and Camilla. While nothing inappropriate had occurred, the historical relationship was being positioned as potentially scandalous, regardless of the facts. The media narrative was becoming more important than the actual story. As the discussion continued, an unexpected voice joined the conversation. Queen Elizabeth herself entered the conference room, having learned about the meeting from her personal secretary. Her presence transformed the atmosphere immediately, as everyone rose in respect for the monarch who had dedicated her entire adult life to serving her people. The Queen listened patiently as the situation was explained to her once more, this time with all perspectives represented. Her weathered hands remained steady as she absorbed the complexity of the dilemma she had unknowingly created. The weight of decades of experience was evident in her thoughtful expression as she considered the various viewpoints presented. What followed was a conversation that none of the participants would ever forget. The Queen spoke about the burden of leadership, the difficulty of making decisions that would be scrutinized and potentially misunderstood. She acknowledged the legitimacy of everyone's concerns, while also explaining her own reasoning for wanting to honor Dr. Hartford's exceptional service. The monarch's wisdom became apparent as she guided the discussion toward a solution that none of them had previously considered. Rather than canceling the ceremony or proceeding despite the concerns, she proposed a modification that would address the Guard's worries while still achieving her original goal of recognizing humanitarian excellence. The Queen suggested expanding the ceremony to honor multiple individuals who had demonstrated extraordinary courage and service in various fields. Dr. Hartford would receive his medal alongside other deserving recipients, making the event about humanitarian service in general, rather than focusing attention on one potentially controversial choice. This approach would dilute any negative attention while actually enhancing the positive message the Queen wanted to convey. The ceremony would celebrate the best of British values and character, with multiple inspiring stories rather than one narrative that might be misinterpreted by critics or sensationalized by media outlets. Dr. Hartford immediately embraced this solution, expressing gratitude that his recognition could be part of a larger celebration of service and sacrifice. He suggested several colleagues from his African missions who deserved equal recognition, demonstrating once again the selfless character that had earned him the honor in the first place. Captain Morrison and his fellow guards were visibly relieved. This approach addressed their primary concerns about optics and timing, while still allowing the Queen to proceed with her original intention. The ceremony would now be much more difficult for critics to attack, as it would clearly be about merit and service rather than any personal considerations. Camilla felt a profound sense of pride in how the situation had been resolved. The open dialogue had revealed the strength of the institution they all served, showing that the monarchy could adapt and evolve while maintaining its core values and dignity. The evening had demonstrated that loyalty and honest communication could coexist successfully. The expanded ceremony took place 6 weeks later in the grand ballroom of Buckingham Palace. Dr. Hartford was honored alongside a teacher who had saved students during a school fire, a police officer who had prevented a terrorist attack, and a volunteer coordinator who had organized massive relief efforts during recent flooding. Media coverage of the event was overwhelmingly positive, focusing on the inspiring stories of courage and service rather than seeking controversy. Dr. Hartford's brief mention of his past acquaintance with Camilla was noted, but not sensationalized, exactly as the planning committee had hoped. The ceremony achieved its intended purpose of celebrating the best of human nature. In the weeks that followed, the guards noticed a subtle but significant change in how palace decisions were made. There was more consultation, more consideration of multiple perspectives, and greater awareness of how royal actions might be perceived in the complex modern media environment. The monarchy had evolved without abandoning its traditions. Captain Morrison received a private commendation from the Queen for his courage in speaking up about his concerns. She recognized that his actions had ultimately strengthened rather than undermined the institution he served. The incident became a case study in how loyal dissent could serve the greater good when handled with respect and wisdom. Dr. Hartford returned to his humanitarian work, carrying his royal medal as both an honor and a responsibility. He continued his medical missions with renewed determination, knowing that his recognition had come through a process that honored both individual merit and institutional wisdom. The experience had deepened his respect for the monarchy's ability to balance competing considerations. The palace guards developed new protocols for raising concerns about royal decisions, creating formal channels for respectful dialogue when situations arose that might affect the monarchy's reputation or effectiveness. Their experience had shown that speaking up responsibly was not disloyalty, but rather the highest form of service. Years later, historians would note this incident as a turning point in how the modern monarchy operated, showing that ancient institutions could adapt to contemporary challenges while maintaining their essential character and dignity. The evening when guards, advisors, and royalty sat together seeking common ground became a symbol of institutional wisdom and flexibility. The Queen's private study returned to its usual quietude, but the small velvet box that had started the entire controversy remained on her desk as a reminder. Sometimes the most important decisions were not about what to do, but about how to do it in a way that honored everyone involved while serving the greater good of the institution and the people it represented. As the sun set over the ancient castle walls, Captain Morrison made a decision that would change everything. He requested a private audience with Queen Camilla, something he had never done in his entire career. The protocol breach was significant, but he felt the situation demanded extraordinary measures. The meeting was arranged for the following morning in the Queen Consort's private sitting room. Captain Morrison spent the night rehearsing what he would say, knowing that his words could either help resolve the growing crisis or make it infinitely worse. The weight of responsibility felt heavier than his ceremonial armor as he prepared to cross a line that could never be uncrossed.